Okay, great. So here we are. All systems go. ArcGIS Pro 2.8. We're ready to blast off with some great desktop GIS technology. And who are we here? Who's with you here today? Well, it's me, Mike Rogotsky. I'm on our technology adoption team. I'm joined by Maggie Sampson from our support services team. How are you today, Maggie?
I'm doing great, Mike. Excited to be here today. How are you?
I'm pretty excited to be here today too. It's a really nice day here in Toronto, so we're looking to present some great content. Some of you may know Maggie if you've called support before. She's also joined us at our end of your webinars where she's presented the winning demonstration each time. So should be a great day here, Maggie. Let's keep rolling with it here and see what we can do. So on the agenda, it's all systems go. That's what astronauts say just as they're ready to launch into orbit. And ArcGIS Pro 2.8, well, it's really set to become, or it's really set to be the desktop tool of your choice. So what are we going to show? We're going to show some performance and talk about some productivity tools that allow you to get the most out of Pro 2.8. We're going to take a look at some different and new ways of analyzing, visualizing your data, which we think are very exciting. And we're also going to show you different tools that are going to help you with your GIS workflows. So everything Maggie and I are going to show today is available with the basic license where, except where noted. So there'll be a few tools that use the advanced functionality and an extension as well. We'll take note of that during the webinar. But first, Maggie and I have a question we'd like to ask you through a poll. So we'd like to know, have you started using ArcGIS Pro 2.8 yet? So Pro 2.8, it came out on May 14th. It's part of what is largely known as the ArcGIS 2021 Q2 release. So you might start hearing of these releases being named with the year, ArcGIS 2021, for instance. So that just means anything that means any of the different software that's released during that time will fall under this ArcGIS 2021. So let's take a look at these results. We're still using ArcGIS Pro 2.8, and let's show those poll results for everyone here. So you should see those results. Many of you answered. So a lot of you are using Pro 2.8, part of the ArcGIS 2021 release. Many of you aren't though, and some of you aren't sure. So I think this is a good opportunity for me to turn things over to Maggie. She'll talk about how you can get 2.8, as well as some of these performance enhancements that I've alluded to. So I'll flip things over to you next, Maggie.
Great, thanks, Mike. So for those of you who haven't started using ArcGIS Pro 2.8 yet, but are interested in downloading that product, it's available in 3 locations for you. The first place you can download it would be in the My Esri website. If you are a member of your organization there and have access to downloads, you'll see 2.8 listed under that product page for downloads. You can get those install files there. You can also get it from within ArcGIS Pro. So if you have Pro installed on your machine at a previous version, you can go to the About section in the settings and you'll see an option for software updates that are available, and you can download those install files there. The last place that it's available would be in ArcGIS Online for anyone using a named user license for ArcGIS Pro. That license is assigned through your ArcGIS Online username, and if you go to your settings there under your profile, there's a licensing page where you'll see the download option for Pro. That download's going to be the most recently available version for you, and that's where you can get 2.8 as well. You can install those files right on top of your current install, so if you're at 2.7 and want to update, you can just install directly over top to get to 2.8. As Mike mentioned, one of the main emphasis of this release is the performance improvements. So there's been major improvements to ArcGIS Pro 2.8 that you'll see when working with the product, general improvements of drawing layers and tables, and also some major changes to the way geoprocessing tools are working on the backside that have sped things up. For example, just some of the tools that Esri tested, so we can see how those improvements have shown. When we look at for the multi-part to single part tool, a test was done with vectorized geology polygons for Canada, some of those multi-part features having over 50 million vertices. When running the multi-part to single part in ArcMap without the 64-bit background geoprocessing, that tool is going to fail and you'll get an out-of-memory error when you try to run that. They tested it again at ArcMap with the 64-bit background geoprocessing as well as at ArcGIS Pro 2.7. That tool took about 36 hours to run, and then finally testing it with ArcGIS Pro 2.8, it took only about 2 hours, so some major improvements in processing times there. Similar thing was seen with the append tool when using the append tool to add 40,000 points to a feature service. You can see in ArcGIS Pro 2.7 that took about 15 minutes to run, whereas in ArcGIS Pro 2.8 it took only 25 seconds. So all around just major improvements in the way the geoprocessing tools will run, and you'll see that when you start working with the tool yourself. I'm going to hand it back over to Mike, who's going to go over some of the new things we're seeing and show you those tools in action.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Good to hear about those performance improvements. Let's start talking about some of this functionality that's available to you now in 2.8. There is a new set of tools called the data engineering tools. These are really nice tools that allow you to analyze and sort of get an understanding of your data and how you might want to work with it next as you're going to perform further analysis or visualizations of the data. We're also going to look at the command search. This is a handy way to find the different tools that you may want to use within ArcGIS Pro all in one spot. When you add data now or add folder connections, you'll find that those connection windows, they mirror what you'd see in your File Explorer categories in Windows. So things like your quick access, your downloads, your mapped network drives, those will all show the same way. Also, there's some great table improvements that you can use that are going to make things a little bit easier to navigate tables and allow you to set some settings that you might like to use. So the data I'm going to use in this demonstration comes from our COVID-19 Canada hub. And after, when the slides are sent out, you could download the link. You could download the data from that link there to give it a try. So let's move into our first demonstration. And here we are in ArcGIS Pro 2.8. I've got a map of Canada showing the total cases total cases per 100,000 of the population by province. So this data set goes all the way from when the pandemic started to May 4th. But I didn't have that field with me in the data to begin with. So I had to sort of understand my data, work with it to kind of get to this map. So I'll go through the process of how I got here using a more updated data set going all the way to June 20th. So I'm going to work in a new map, and I want to change the base map. So any of the commands that I work with, I can now use the command search to do that. What's nice about the command search is when I go to pick certain tools that I interact with, I could change the what I'm working with directly from the command search. So I want to use our community map of Canada, dark gray, for instance, in this map. I can flip that over and change it to there in our map. So that's nice. Likewise, I can add data using the add data tools. I can open the open to where I'd like to access the data. And then I click data and off I go. So another way for you to get to the tools that you want to use and work with. As I get into add data here, I'm starting to see now that this mimics what I would see in File Explorer, my quick access. My maps network drives are going to show up just like I would expect them to when I'm working in my File Explorer. They now show the same in ArcGIS Pro. So I downloaded this data set to my downloads folder on my Windows machine here, and I'm going to add in those provinces. So they'll come in, and here they are. What I'd like to do is just start looking at those attributes that I have in the table. What am I going to see here when I load them up? 13 provinces and territories, a slew of information about COVID information. I have the click to add new row button. This is something that sometimes I click by mistake. So what I can do now at 2.8, if I don't like those options to have that, I can also go in to table here in my backstage, click hide, and there we go. That'll allow me to click that button, and then I don't have that click to add new row there. So that's kind of nice. What else do I see here? I've got a last updated field here. This indicates that it was updated on the 20th, all at 3 p.m. So since everything's at 3 p.m., why don't I go into the fields and eliminate the time from my the records that I have here. So that's easy to do now at 2.8. I can go in and format my date fields very quickly with this nice table improvement. And I'll see now that my provinces table don't have the time. Okay, so this is nice. I'm sort of exploring the data. I want to understand it even better. So what I'll do next is I'm going to go out to those data engineering tools. One of the ways I can get to them from the command search, I've used it previously, so it's already in my recently used. that will open up this content here with every field type, showing that it's, numeric or integer or date and so on. And then what I can do is take some of those fields, select them, and then I can add them to this right panel where it'll calculate statistics for them. So I get a wide array of information here showing nulls, maximum minimum values, standard deviations, and so on. So I can start to look at this data set and say, what does this actually mean? I could get this information other ways as well, but it's nice to have this in a one concise spot, all within these data engineering tools. It's not just a statistical jumping point as well. Say I want to think about mapping case information. So I could look at quickly displaying this by total case information. Looking at this total case information, I figure this probably mirrors population. So, and we see that it does. So I'm starting to, understand like, what am I going to have to work with here to actually display something that's a little more meaningful. I can also at this point jump off to work with my charts. So I'll go to create a bar chart, and we're going to get to the properties here. In the next demonstration, Maggie's going to show us some chart improvements, but I'm going to just use this to show how, like through these data engineering tools, I can very quickly get to the tools that I want to use to better understand what I'm seeing with my data. So for instance, here, if I start looking at population in the light blue, total cases in the dark blue, they don't exactly mirror each other. A few provinces with a slightly lower population have a slightly higher COVID case count. So this leads me to believe I'm probably going to have to make some adjustments to the data to get that meaningful information out of it. So from that data engineering tool, I can use it to get to other tools that I might use. So I'm going to calculate a field based on total number of cases per 100,000 of the population. So it's nice that I can, all in this one spot, get to the tools that I need to perform my analysis, visualization with the data. So I'll do total cases per 100,000. Make sure I change it to an integer. Then total cases divided by total population, and then we'll times that by 100,000. I think I got the right number of zeros. And here we go. So what's really great about this, it automatically adds it to my enriched provinces data engineering window. It also adds it into any place that I have. Actually, let me do this. It adds it into my chart tools as well. So from here, I can show total cases per 100,000, apply that, and I'll start to get a different trend in the data. So I can see I'm comparing apples to apples here across the provinces. Then I can further go through, start to update the symbology based on those fields, and then even go in and I can refine this further, like I would with any of my symbology tools that I would be working with. So these data engineering tools, they're really combining a lot of functionality that we've had sort of in different spots, but it puts them in one spot for you to start to work with your data and as you're going to visualize and analyze it further. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I'm going to turn things back over to Maggie, and she's going to take us through another set of functional improvements. Maggie.
Thanks, Mike. That's great to see. I'm really excited to start working with the command search, especially. So let's take a look at some more tools that we're going to see in ArcGIS Pro 2.8. Some changes have been made to charting, particularly when working with Python. The Python API has been updated to include now an arcpy.charts module, which makes just your experience using Python for charting much better overall. There's also been some improvements to the charts in general. We can also see another thing that's been added is the polygon fill select, which is a new option when selecting polygons, as well as some improved messaging in your geoprocessing tools. So let's take a look at some of this in action. All right, so on my map here, we can see the city of Toronto, as well as many points that represent different reported crimes for 2020. My data is coming from the Toronto Open Data site. So let's say I'm working with the city, police, and I just want to get a better understanding of what my data shows, the types of crimes that have been reported and where those are happening. So that's what we're going to look at today. The first thing I want to do is when I was working with this data, I updated some of it with some spelling mistakes. So I want to go ahead and correct that. I added a domain now to avoid that in the future so we can see the different types of reported crimes that I've added. But to fix the couple mistakes I've already made, I'm just going to make a quick selection here. We're going to select the ones where I have spelled assault with only one A. So I can apply that and see that we've got a number of points that were selected in our attribute table here. We'll see that there are 51 of my points that I need to update. So I can do this using our field calculator. Let's open that up. All right, and in ArcGIS Pro 2.8, this tool has been modified to include the enforce domains option. When I check this on, it's going to verify that the value I put in my calculator meets the domain. So if I again spelled it incorrectly, I'm going to now get an error message when I try to run the tool, and it's going to not change my values. So I spelled it correctly this time, and oh, did I spell it incorrectly? I did spell it incorrectly, so I'm going to do it again. Okay. There you go. You can see how that tool works. So I'll go ahead and update them again. This time it did run, and you can see that that's going to just make sure you're not making those kinds of spelling errors or just incorrect values in your data. Now that I've got it spelled correctly, I want to clip it to the Toronto neighborhood. So I'm going to use our clip tool, the classic geoprocessing tool here. And once I open the tool, you can see there's a message here that the pairwise clip tool provides enhanced functionality or performance. So we're going to see these types of messages on some of the older geoprocessing tools that have newer tools released that perform the same function but have just been changed a little bit. So the pairwise clip tool, you can see it looks very similar, but this tool allows you to work with vector data. So it gives you the same output. It does clip your data the same way. It just gives you a better, possibly better performance. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and we can see that it's going to give you the same option. We don't want to get rid of those existing tools like clip because we know they're very commonly used, but it just lets you know what other options are available. Now we have our data cleaned up to the city of Toronto, and so I can continue my analysis. I want to get an idea of the types of crimes that are occurring in the city, so I can do that using a bar chart. I can use the tools that are built in, but I want to use Python to make this chart. So let's open up my Python notebook here. You can see that I have two little scripts. The first is the old method that you would use for Python to make a bar chart, and the new method down here with the ArcPy charts module. We can see that this module just makes things a lot cleaner when working with Python. So in our old method, we'd had to define a generic chart object, assign the chart a type, and then give each of those parameters their own line. So it just makes your code quite a lot longer. Now with this new module, we can set up our charts. We have access to the chart class, so we can set up our bar chart and then define each of the parameters in the class constructors, putting everything in just one line and making things a lot cleaner. It's a much more efficient way of working with Python to make those charts, and it's more similar to what you might be used to in other programs outside of ArcGIS. When we run these, we can see that we're going to get the same output for both of these different sets of code. One of them is just a lot cleaner and easier to work with. So in our chart here, we can see the different count of different types of crimes that were reported. And it looks like the vast majority of them for 2020 were assaults. So maybe we want to focus on assaults in our analysis because we have quite a few of those being reported. All right, so now I know that I want to look at assaults, but maybe I want to look at when those crimes are being reported. So let's open up another chart. This time I'll use the built-in chart option here. We'll open up another bar chart, and I want to look at the reported date of different incidents. So we can see right away we've got our reported dates, number of reports per day across the last year. Since ArcGIS Pro 2.7, we can add the moving average line, which will give us an indication of what the trend looks like. New to 2.8, though, is we can export this now as a table, and it's actually going to include those averages. So I exported this earlier, and you can see I've got those averages included now, which just makes that tool a little bit more useful. We can also take a look then at our selected values. So let's go ahead and make another selection where offense type is equal to assault. Apply that, and we can switch over to our selected. So now we're seeing the same table, but just for the count of assaults. And another thing that's been added to 2.8 that makes working with this type of table a little bit more valuable is we can add these vertical grid lines. So we can add a date marker to our data here. Maybe I noticed that in August it looked like there was the peak of reported assaults. So I can go in for August and add that line, give it a color that makes it pop out, and we can just notice that maybe that's a day we want to pay attention to. We can also add these guides for period of time. So let's go ahead and add one for a period that it looks like there's some less reports going on in here. So it looks like about mid to late March into mid to late May. We're seeing that there were a few less reported. Maybe it looks like it kind of lines up with the beginning of the COVID-19 stay-at-home regulations in Ontario. So we can notice that and it can export this and include it in reports and just get a little more value from this date information. Another improvement that's been made to charting is with the scatter plot matrix. So let's look at this for the Toronto neighborhood information. I have my neighborhood set up here to have different values. So I've added information like population density, age, different variables like that, so that we can take a look at how those variables might explain what we're seeing in the assaults. So I can go ahead and add those variables in here. I've also added the number of assaults per person, so it's balanced for the population. Right away, we get our scatter plots showing the relationship between variables here, and we can change that value to different metrics. Pearson's R was added in 2.7, but we can now add this in the upper right corner as well. So we can do a direct comparison here. We have the R squared and Pearson's R values. Another improvement made was we can now sort by those as well, and we can add a target field. So if we want to select number of assaults per person as our target, it's going to line that up on our left side or the top of our table, making it a lot easier to interpret what we're seeing. I'll also add the field names across the diagonal. So here we can much more easily see how these different variables impact or are related to our number of assaults. From our table here, from our Pearson's R, it looks like we're having a relatively strong relationship between income and number of assaults per person, as well as population density. So this suggests that we might see an increase in number of assaults per person where the density is higher, and we may see a decrease where income is higher because of the negative relationship. We can take a look at what this looks like on our map. We close these tables. I'm just going to change the symbology. This symbology option is one of my favorites. It's not new to 2.8. It's just a great tool to be aware of, is the bivariate colors. It lets us look at two different values at once. So I can take a look at income here as well as population density. And this is going to give me values that we can easily see where high and low. So high income is pink, high density is this blue color, indigo would be high of both. I'm interested in where the income is lower and the density is higher. So looking at this bright blue color, it looks like on our map here, we have a few polygons in this area that have that value. So let's take a look at those. Maybe you want to select those out and take a closer look at them, or have them as an area to emphasize where you may want to have more outreach. So I can select those out. You'll notice when you're selecting polygons, sometimes it's a bit difficult to tell if this one's selected or this one because of the way that the lines get highlighted. So in ArcGIS Pro 2.8, we have an option in our settings over here where I can go ahead and change my selection type, and I can change my selection setting to have a different color. This is not new, but we do have the option to add a fill now. So you can add a hatched or solid fill. I'm going to add the hatched fill, and we can take a look at my map and see how much clearer it is right away that these are the selected features. Just makes it a lot easier to see what you're dealing with there when you have polygons that are selected. So there are some of the new charting options that help you understand your data, and it definitely helped me interpret what I'm looking at in my map here. Hopefully you can start using these as well. I'll pass it back over to Mike, who's going to start taking some questions.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. Like seeing those charts in action. They're really good. A lot of good enough functionality there that we can start working with. So we're blasting off into orbit here, and we've shown you this functionality so far that we can see here, rating from the charts, the data engineering, polygon fill select, which is fantastic. Some questions are coming through here, and I'm going to take a couple of them right now. A lot of you were interested in what the difference was with that clip and pairwise clip. So really at 2.8, there is these pairwise tools are essentially there to help increase performance and accuracy with working with larger data sets on a single machine. So there is some specific functionality related to the pairwise clip in that it's with the original clip, it does use parallel processing as well, but for the pairwise clip tool, parallel processing is enabled by default. So I did paste into the chat there one of the responses, and it has a link for much more information on that topic. Another question that I did want to address was within that command search, why are some of the tools grayed out? So this could be because the pairwise tool is context sensitive in that it doesn't, if you're not on like a layer in the contents and it's a tool that you need to do that, it'll be grayed out. Could also be a licensing issue that you don't have the license for that tool as well. So keep those questions coming. We'll take more of those as we get into the presentation. But on to more functionality. So we're going to look next at the new big data connection. This is a tool that allows us to bring different data sets together that exist in separate files and use them as one contiguous data set within ArcGIS Pro. These tools were introduced at 2.6, but now at 2.8, there is a wizard that will take you through this process. This functionality does require an advanced license, so that's something you'll be aware of if you're looking to try this. The rest of this functionality, though, here, the way group layers behave in 2.8, these are all basic license level tools. They behave more like ArcMap now. Your geoprocessing messages are also a little more concise with the window. They're formatted better. There's some copy functions as well. And the copy Python command tool is a nice way to copy a Python script from the tool that you've just run and use it in the Python window to jumpstart your Python coding. So let's jump into some more demonstrations again and get into this big data connection. That'll be the heart of what we're working with here. So what I have on my machine here, a bunch of CSV files downloaded from Earthquakes Canada, ranging from 2016 to 2021. Here's one of the files for 2016. Fairly simple file. It has location and other bits of information available to it, and it also lists whether it's an earthquake or a blast or mining information or a mining related incident as well. So I'm going to work with this data in one data set in ArcGIS Pro. So let me get back into Pro. Here's where I'm going to start with this. I'm going to work with our new big data connection. I'm going to get to it from the command search. It's in my recently used data, so that's nice. And I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it seismic. And I'm going to specify the folder that I want to work with. So the data was contained in the seismic data folder. And then I will create the connection. So previous to 2.8, I would have had to go into my toolboxes, geoanalytics, desktop tools, utilities, big data connection, and use these tools separately to sort of create the connection, create a BDC file, add the data sets to it, massage the data any way it needed to be done. And these tools can still be used today. For instance, if I want to add new layers after I'm finished or remove data sets, I can do that as well from here. But this wizard's a nice way to work with the data. It's all sort of that one-stop shop. So I see I have my layer created. I'm going to check to see if it looks up to my expectations. So I'll click on the table there, and it does a quick query of the first 10 layers, and I can see this is formatted similar to what I saw in the CSV file. If I want to make changes to it, though, I can go into the properties, and I can see, okay, so this magnitude type, I might not want that. How's my geometry stack up? Latitude, longitude, that looks good. I've got time fields that I could adjust if I needed to, but this seems to match up. And lastly, I've got a filter. So I'm only interested in earthquakes. I'm not interested in the mining and the other blasts and those sorts of activities in my data. So I can use this to filter out those features specifically. So when I finish, it's kind of anticlimactic, but when I go to my catalog, I'll see that in this folder here, I've got this seismic BDC and a layer that I could bring into my map and begin to work with. Well, I'm a little curious to see how this is actually played out. So I'm going to go into my geoprocessing tool, specifically my history, and I'm going to do a describe on it. So what's this describe going to do? It's essentially, I'm browsing to that BDC file, that big data connection file, the Canada layer, and I'm going to output it to this describe data set to get some information back about essentially what's in the table. So I'm doing this as well to show you some of these improvements in the geoprocessing windows that we have. So once that's finished running, I'll go to my details, and this geoprocessing window just looks so much nicer at 2.8. We can see this is nicely formatted. We can see the messages. It looks fairly modern. I can understand what I have here. I want to see my temporal extent. It does go from 2016 to 2021, so hooray, this has likely worked. To celebrate, I'm going to copy all the details to a clipboard, and I'm going to take it now, and I can save this later in a text file, put it in a report. This is good information that I want to keep. So nice to be able to use that at 2.82. I might want to modify what I'm running here with this describe data set, and I might want to do it in Python. So I'm going to take this copy Python command. I'll go to my analysis window. I'll bring up the Python environment. Maggie worked with a notebook. I'm going to work with the Python window. But now I can just paste that code here, and then I can run with it as a new command. Maybe I want to rerun it again, creating another data set for it, adjust different parameters, maybe work with the options. This is a nice way to start, working with Python if you want to start scripting this up based on the results of what you've just run. Okay, so enough monkeying around with that stuff. Let's go into our layer here, the Canada layer, and I'm going to bring it into the map to see what I see here. Okay, so this is as I'd expect. I've got points across Canada. Looks like a lot on the west coast, some on the east coast. I want to look at the table just because I'm curious, how many features did I get there? I guess I could have looked at my geoprocessing results, but I'm going to do it here. I'm going to load all the layers. So 20,000 points that I've got from 2016 up to about mid-May 2021. What's nice here is as I scroll to at 2.8, the actual features are listed here, the records. That didn't happen previous, that it kind of went all blank. So that's kind of a nice little extra bonus feature that we have there. Okay, one last thing, I want to understand the density of this. So I'll go back to my geoprocessing history, and I'm going to grab the aggregate points tool. This is a nice way that I can just put my points based on density to better represent them instead of the what I see here. So I'm going to go to create Canada layer. I'm going to create these hexagonal bins, basically 100 kilometers in size, but I'm going to step it apart month by month. So as I run this, this will give me that new layer, and providing everything works, I should be able to step through it from sort of these time sequences to look at our data. Okay, so I've got some points. This goes back earlier on in 2016, but as I step through now, it'll animate it. So each point, each hexagon, the darker it is, the more earthquakes there are. So that's nice. I've been able to use that big data connection. Since I'm finished, what I think I'll do is put these into a group layer. So now when I group my layers together at 2.8, I can start off, and that layer will get dropped in individually into the group layer, and then I can add in that additional layer or layers that I want to have in there as well. So some more features there at 2.8. I'm going to turn things back over to Maggie. She's going to take us through a whole bunch of other great functionality that you can start to use. Maggie?
Thanks, Mike. That's great. I like the big data connection stuff is really great with 2.8. So we're going to go ahead and look at a couple more tools here with 2.8. We can see that there's going to be a difference in the way that we sign in to ArcGIS Online. We're going to look at some business analyst options that have been improved. Business analyst tools do require a business analyst extension license, but we'll take a look at how those have been changed, particularly favoriting variables and a new geoprocessing tool that's been added. And we can also take a look at some definition query filters that we have access to now in our table of contents. So let's see these in action here. Great, so on my map here we can see the city of Calgary. I've got the Calgary neighborhoods as well as the Alberta coffee shops. This data is coming from Business Analyst 2020 dataset. And today I want to open up a new coffee shop in Alberta. I want to open a coffee shop downtown Calgary, and I'm going to use some of the business analyst tools to help me decide which of the available locations I want to rent out for my business. So I'm going to first start by removing some of these polygons. I've set up a definition query here that shows me the city center or inner city areas. I only want to see those today, so I'll turn that on here. And we can see that now I've got just downtown Calgary in my polygons. And then I need to bring in some data that I started working with in Business Analyst Online. I've got my points in there, so I'm going to sign into ArcGIS Pro to do that, ArcGIS Online. Sign in here, I can open that up, and you can see your regular sign in dialog box, but 2.8, we also have this option in the bottom here to sign in using the browser. This option is available because ArcGIS Pro 2.8 is going to use the version of Chromium that's most recently available when the product is released. So Chromium can update before ArcGIS Pro might release an update, and those versions might not match. For security reasons, some organizations prefer to have the most recent version available, and using this is going to go to your default browser. So if I click on this, it's going to open up my browser here. I can see my sign-in option. I can sign in with my ArcGIS Online username and password, and then I'm back into Pro, should be signed in. Oh, try that again. It didn't sign me in. That's okay. Switch to my Sport. There we go. Now I'm in. Okay, so if I go into my project tab, I can also control this here in my portals. You'll see there's the sign in using browser option. So you can turn that on if you want that to be your default setting for ArcGIS Pro. Once I'm signed in, now I'm going to have access to my Business Analyst Online data. So let's go to my Business Analyst tools and use the Add Business Analyst Web App Sites. This is a new feature that's been added to ArcGIS Pro 2.8 and makes working with your Business Analyst Online projects a lot easier in ArcGIS Pro. By default, it opens up to my most recent project, but I do have access to my other ones here as well. And I can see that I can add individual sites if I want, or all of my sites, which I'm going to add all three because I'm interested in all three locations. And those are added right to my map here, which is great. You can also see some polygons I was working on. I don't need those right now, so I'll just turn those off. Great, those are the three locations that I have available to rent. So I want to get an idea of the number of competitors I have in my neighborhood, and I'm going to use the new tool, the Find Nearby Locations tool. A similar tool did exist in our map. So there was the location reporter tool, but this is new to ArcGIS Pro, so it's the first time we're seeing this here. I'm going to open it up from the history, so it's all filled out for me, and get that running while we look at what our options here are. So I have my input location, which are my point features, and then I have my ID, which each point has a unique name. I'm going to look for the coffee shops that are around my point, and then I'm looking for coffee shops that are within a 5-minute walk. And I do also have the option to create a report, which I've turned on, which is going to give me a PDF report of those coffee shops nearby with the variables I've selected for them. And I also changed my network parameters so that it's giving me the locations out away from my input. The results of this are a point feature, which is added by default with the same symbology as the other coffee shop. So I'm just going to switch this over to unique values, use that name field that I selected as my input field, and just get these into different colors so we can get an easy idea of what kind of competition we're looking at for our project here. Perfect. And when we zoom in, we can see it's pretty clear right away that our one location has a lot of competitors compared to the others. And this is within a 5-minute walk. So that's a lot of competition we're dealing with. And I can also take a look at the report to show this as well. So here's the PDF report. For our first location, we have 5 locations in a 5-minute walk. Our second, we have 20 in a 5-minute walk, and our third only has 2. So it's pretty clear right away to me that I don't think I'm going to want to have this as my option. It's just too many competitors to deal with, and I'm going to stick between these 2 locations here. Now that I know that these ones don't have too many competitors, I want to get an idea of the demographic information in these neighborhoods, and I can use another geoprocessing tool for that. I'm going to use the Business Analyst Enrich tool. This is not new to ArcGIS Pro 2.8. It's been around for a while, but it has been enhanced to improve the way that this tool works. So we can look at the way that this is changed in the variables. So any business analyst tool that works with these variables, we're seeing an improvement in the way you deal with these because we now have the option to favorite those variables. Anyone who's familiar with business analyst might know that sometimes you have to go through quite a lot of folders to find things you use all the time. So now you have the option of just adding this little star next to ones you use frequently, and they're going to show up in your favorites list. You can see I have some that I use all the time that I've favorited here already. For today, I want to look at population and I want to look at percent spending on snacks and beverages at restaurants because I want an area that has a lot of people and who are going to spend a lot of money on my coffee. So I'm going to enrich my neighborhoods with that. And we'll run this to get our downtown Calgary information. Perfect. So I've got this added to my map. And then again, I want to use one of my favorite symbology tools, the one I used before, which is our bivariate colors. And right away, it's going to add those two variables I enriched with. And we can see that the areas with the dark purple, I'll just move this a little bit lower so it's underneath my points. The areas with the dark purple here are going to have the highest population and the highest spending at restaurants and snacks and beverages. So I think I'm actually going to go with this location. It has 3 more competitors, but it has the demographic information that I want. So these tools help us see that kind of information when making these decisions. Now that I have my downtown neighborhoods, the last thing I want to do is I'm just going to bring back those other neighborhoods for Calgary. I don't need that filter anymore. So I can turn off my definition query pretty easily and find that layer with this new table of contents filter, the active definition query filter. When we click on this, we can see right away the only layer that has a definition query is our Calgary neighborhoods. I can pop in here, go ahead and turn that off, and I can see all of my other neighborhoods are going to be added back. So if I zoom out a little bit here, we've got those neighborhoods back if I wanted to do some more analysis with that. And it's just so much easier to deal with definition queries when you have a lot of layers this way. So there we have, those are the new business analyst tools and some other enhancements to ArcGIS Pro 2.8 that can help you make business decisions and hopefully will help you with your projects. I'll go back over to Mike again, who's going to take a couple more questions.
That's great, Maggie. Really nice information. There are nice coffee shops in Calgary. Good to see the people of Calgary getting some more coffee. Good. That's great. So we're getting ready for reentry here, and we've shown some more functionality here. New big data connection wizard, signing in with the browser, those definition query filters. That's a lot of fantastic stuff. So a couple of questions that have came through here is one question was about the big data connection and working with file geodatabases. How does that work? The big data connection doesn't work with file geodatabases. It's more meant to work with files that are sort of these standalone files that you want to combine individually. So CSV and shape files are the main types of files that it works with. So combining those together. You could also work with what's known as Parquet, and there's one other type of file, I believe it's ORC files that you could work with if that's something you use. So that's you could check that out for that functionality. There was another question here about we were using the community map of Canada vector-based maps, and someone had commented that they're not seeing those in ArcGIS Pro. So the most likely reason for that would be you don't have them set up in your ArcGIS Online organization or your ArcGIS Enterprise organization. So you'd want to go into your, if you're not the administrator of ArcGIS Online, you would want to go in there through the web and in your organization settings where the map is. And there's some functions there that might not be enabled for those vector-based maps. That would be the first place that I would check to see what's happening there. Okay, so we'll save time for some more questions at the end. I'm glad to see we're getting so many questions, but we're going to keep marching forward here. And we're going to talk about layouts in our last demonstration. So some nice improvements with layouts at 2.8. We can export our layouts now as these accessible PDFs. So what I mean by accessible PDFs is for people that use screen readers to help them understand the information that is on their computer screen. We can embed information through alt text in the PDF that will allow screen readers to read that PDF and allow the people that need that assistive technology to understand the map that you're making for them. Other ways that we can work with the map, our map frame or our layout, is to capture this to clipboards. This is a fairly simple improvement, but it's one that's quite it's quite, I'm quite using it a lot. Basically, it just takes a screenshot and then you can put it anywhere, like into an email, into social media, into a PowerPoint. Very quick and easy to use. I quite like it. And there's also, just to sort of come full circle, more shortcuts added into the layouts as well that is going to make it easier when you're working with your text to try and get more, just to reduce the amount of time that you're using to make your map. So let's go back to our final ArcGIS Pro map. And so this is a little hobby map of mine that I've been working on as I've been this past year. So the NHL, for those that follow hockey, they realign their divisions into these Central, West, East, and North divisions for this year. And I've just placed the arenas based on where they are across Canada and the US. So I'm finishing it up. And I want to add a subtitle here for this title for NHL arenas. So now at 2.8, I can just take the Control key, and that'll allow me to, when that's selected, bring in that field, not field, sorry, that text, and it just does a copy of it. So I can start to position it, and then I can work with it independently in my formatting text frame here. So I'll go to 2020, 21 season, and I'll probably want to change that text symbol so I'll get that feedback, and I'll just make this a little bit smaller here. But this is nice. When I make this copy, it allows me to get that text and set up what I want for my NHL arenas and the subtitle I have here. So what I can do too here, maybe I want to group these together because it is kind of just one sort of piece of text. I'll take 1, 2 with the Shift key, and then with Control G, it then adds it together as one group element. So that's a nice way to pair those two together now, and I could work with those within the map this way. Okay, so I've got the map pretty much set how I sort of getting near my final product. I want to start to think about sharing it out here, and I'm not sure if this is what I want or how I want it to finish up. So what I can do here is use this new capture to clipboard, which just literally captures a visible extent of the layout to the clipboard. So I'll take that, get a little toaster notification to say that this has been copied, and then I can start to paste it pretty much anywhere. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to go out to my Twitter account here. I'm going to paste this into this tweet. So if you want to go see that map, you could find me, Mike Rogotsky, or follow any of these hashtags on Twitter, and you'll be able to see this this map and go out and take a look at that at your convenience. So very powerful. I can quickly get that information out through social media that I've just been working with in ArcGIS Pro. Okay, I'm finishing up, like I mentioned here. I want to add that assistive information here, sort of that to make that accessible PDF. So whether I'm working with a map frame, a chart, or an image, I can go into the properties now. And when I get into the properties, I want to make sure I go to this accessibility section. And this is where the alt text is. So this is the text that the assistive technology, like the screen reader, will pick up and be able to use. So I put this in here. Note it says Continental United States of America, Southern Canada. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind number 31, because we'll hear that in a second when we use a screen reader to read this. What I have to do before I, well, as I export it, I'll go to my export layout. I need to make sure that I have indicated to include that, include accessibility tags, and then do the export. I'm going to overwrite it. And that will create the PDF with that accessible information embedded with it. So that's finished. What I'm going to have our administrator Jacek do is, if he could bring up his screen, he's got the screen reader set up with the PDF that I sent him. And we've just made not the screen reader set up, but we've got a video that has the screen reader playing the audio that you'll be able to hear and see on the resulting map. So it's coming up now. Here we see the map, and we can play it. So not hearing the audio quite yet. So we'll give it one more try there, perhaps. So I think you're still muted as the host there. Jacek. So maybe we can give that one more try.
NHL Arenas Adobe Acrobat Reader DC left paren 32 bit right paren. Map of the continental United States of America and southern Canada showing the locations of 31 National Hockey League teams' home arenas. Arenas are classified based on the 4 divisions.
That's great. Thanks, Jacek. Thanks for getting that to play up. So I think you get a sense of how that screen reader would work. We heard it read the title of the document first, the generic information about it, and then it gets into that assistive text that the screen reader can use with the accessible information. So touchdown. We've been able to get through a lot of that functionality that we have in ArcGIS Pro 2.8. We've looked at, first of all, we talked about some performance, then we really got into the productivity tools. We've seen new ways of analyzing and visualizing your data, some with the data engineering, some with new charts, and other ways that you can use different tools to help with your GIS workflows. So we didn't cover, Maggie and myself, we didn't cover everything in Pro 2.8. There's a lot in there. So we invite you to check out each of these links here. They all start bit.ly/ArcGISPro, then dash, either blog, doc, or notes. That's where you're going to find the most comprehensive information if you want to find out more about the things we were working with, or you want to dive in to see if like little bits of functionality that you've been looking for were added at this release. So you can scribble those down now. We will be sending out a PDF of the slides too, and you'll be able to click those links and get to those as well. So some other resources for you. We always want you to come back for more webinars. And this summer we've got a little bit of lighter fare. We're going to have an Esri Canada Summer School with a little more introductory to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS and ArcGIS Pro. So these are meant to be refreshers, or if you have some colleagues or staff that want to learn more about online and pro at more of a, not say beginner level, but more get acquainted level, then I'd ask you to consider signing up for these webinars here. As well, if you want to go deeper, we've got some fantastic training courses related to visualizations, analysis, and working with Model Builder that you'll find valuable when you're working within ArcGIS Pro as well. So that concludes the content that we have for the webinar. As mentioned, we'll send a recording, we'll send the PDF slides out to everyone. If you have any additional questions about the content that's presented, you can feel free to contact Maggie or myself after the webinar. So we do have some time left. I'm just going to ask our Administrator Jacek to stop the recording. Maggie and I'll collect ourselves, and then we'll come back and get to as many questions as we can. So just give us a sec and we'll be right back with you.